No. No, I can rest assured on that one. Let me just have a look at see if I can get on YouTube. I don't know why it's not doing it. Okay, apparently we're live. So let's go for it.
Yay.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Simon Misiewicz this time. So apologies for all the technical glitches that I seem to be having and you seem to be having by watching me. So I can only but apologize for that. And what I will do is try and be a little bit more professional going forward. I've put it even on gallery mode for this time. So welcome, everyone. My name is indeed Simon Misiewicz, the howler of technology for the Property Experts panel. I am pleased that I've now fumbled my way to getting the sack from the BBC before I've even started. So good evening to you all. My name is Simon Misiewicz from Optimised Accountants, and what I'll do is I'll give myself a little bit of a break and take a bit of a hot pill and let everyone else introduce themselves. So Bronwen, why don't you kick us off?
Okay, well done, Simon. I'm Bronwen Vearncombe. This is my expert panel. I invited Simon over a year ago to host this because he's so good technically. But this panel is made up of great people. We've been doing this now for over a year and we've got some great expertise in the room. So let me just explain who I am. So I'm a property investor down in Hampshire. I invest in HMOs, holiday lets, guest houses and development. And I also have an online training program and love to help other people learn. So a little bit more about that later on in this evening. So let me hand across to Teresa. Introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. Good to be here, and I'm pleased to be here with such a professional panel. Yes, I just wanted to say that I'm here representing the National Residential Landlord Association. Prior to all the chaos that is going on worldwide, I used to hold regular networking meetings and legislative update meetings in my area in the Midlands. But now everything seems to have moved online. But that's good that we can still all connect with each other. So as well as working for the NRLA, I'm also a landlord centered around HMOs. I've got HMO property, tenants on benefits. And in fact, we've got a question in tonight, advanced question, that basically I thought, is that my story? Because it's very much the scenario that I'm going through at the moment with antisocial behaviour and so on. But yeah, so I look forward to sharing that later on, that question. I just on the slide, just wanted to pull up. I just thought this Trustpilot comment was just about to say it all for the NRLA. The person says, fantastic value for £75 a year, really good information and advice. Would have to spend a lot of time and probably money to find out what I need to know to run our business. They don't rest on the laurels and are constantly updating service and info. So I think that does, pretty much sum it up for the NRLA. We're here to, to help, and we're a great source of advice and information. And we've got all the templates that you need to manage your business. I just pulled up a few points just to
before you do that, Teresa, we'll come on to the slides later on.
Oh, right, I see. I thought I was on the slide.
Don't worry. No. It's absolute problem. There's no technical issues here, audience. My beloved audience, we're all good and singing on.
It's all seamless this evening.
It is perfectly seamless. It's not the May bank holiday going overboard at all. So let's move on.
Yes, moving on.
Tim, come on. Let's have a. Who are you?
Good question. I'm even worse with technology than Simon. So that's something to look forward to. Who am I? I'm Tim Bishop. I own a law firm, Bankruptcy and HMO. Got about 65 staff, and we deal with the full service of legal services. But in particular, we do a lot of work for property investors. We have a specialist property investor team, and also we have a specialist team within that who do with leasehold work, nothing but lease extension and franchising to right to manage. Probably the biggest specialist team of its type in the country. We always offer free initial phone advice to property investors. Also, I'm an investor and developer, so I've got experience of commercial conversions, SA, HMOs, and also recently I've been hosting legal masterclasses. We've finished series 1, and we're shortly to put that season on recorded versions live. And then after that, we will then do season 2. And so that's quite fun as well. So that's me, Tim Bishop from Bankruptcy and Bishop. Over to Simon Hodgson.
Right. Good evening, everybody. So I'm here to represent Funding and Finance tonight. I've been involved in property probably, I guess, as long as some of the other guys on here. 20 years I've been doing it on and off. Learned through the credit crunch, had to lose it all and then rebuild it back up. And typically I started my training and found out that it wasn't difficult to get more knowledge than the average mortgage broker and kind of then be able to kind of tell brokers what to do and how to do it. And that's really kind of where I come. So technically it's about recycling your cash, how to structure deals, etc. Yeah, that's me. So I've had portfolios of title splits, flats, HMOs, currently specialised particularly in flats at the moment. Yeah, that's me. And I'm going to hand across, because I always talk too long. Simon never likes that if I talk too long. So I'm going to hand across now to Mr. Paul Hilliard.
Thank you, Simon Hodgson. Are you sure you finished? Because I've got another 5 minutes on my clock for you. Welcome, everyone. My name is Paul Hilliard. I'm a property investor, and I can either do the short version, which is ditto what Bronwen said, or I can go in and say everything that she said, which is I'm a HMO investor. I've got 12 HMOs across the board. So I've got student HMOs, professional HMOs, and I have 3 homeless HMOs, which is a bit of a strange word to say, but yeah. And I also do service accommodation, which thankfully is back running full steam ahead now that contractors are really coming out in force. And likewise, as Bronwen said, I do developments and commercial conversions. So if you've got any questions on those type of investments, then please feel free to ask away tonight. I'm also the operations director for LNPG, which is the UK's largest buying group for landlords. And what we do is we don't ask for discounts, we ask for a rebate from the manufacturer. So basically, you'd be like joining an organisation which is the size of a council and getting council benefits, discounts on your purchases. So, for example, the magnet kitchen that we regularly we're renowned for, that retails, retail would be somewhere around 25k for the top end kitchen, and we sold that around 6,400. So that's indicative of the type of savings you get. But rest assured, come and ask for more information or check the LNPG website. So over to Mr. Misiewicz, please, to explain who you are.
Thank you ever so much, everyone. So my name is indeed Simon Misiewicz from Optimised Accountants. How I help people to create their wealth whilst reducing their tax liability. And that's my job done. So that's a 6-second pitch elevator done for you now. Quite professional. Hopefully the beaver watching that bit, not the previous bit. Anyway, let's move on to the slides for this evening. So let's go through the updates. I'm just going to share my slides so we can go through those updates. And I think that's going to be down to you first, Mr. Hodgson. So why don't you take it away?
Right, here we go. So for this month, I'm just going to give a little highlight of a particular lender and demonstrate how potentially as a group we can help you, and then tie in how funding and finance work. So it's a creative strategy for low or no money down. We're going to use a lender called Octane, who are typically a bridging lender, but they do some mid-term mortgage products that go up to 5 years. The reason they do them up to 5 years is they are not considered to be a normal proper mortgage under FCA and Prudential Regulation Authority guidelines, which means some of the criteria I'm going to give you in a minute, you will understand a normal lender wouldn't really be able to work with. Right, so if we can move on to the next slide, Simon. There we go, coming up. Seamless, right. Okay, so as a lender, this is really why we're looking at this particular lender. They'll work or can work with no experience, no minimum income, expats are welcome. They'll fund up to 100% of the refurb costs and up to 75% of the open market value of the funded property. The rates start from 0.65. So it's a great lender, really flexible. We can move on, Simon, to the next one. That'd be great. So, we could go one back, Simon. There are a few terms in here that some of you watching will understand, a few of you might not understand. And I think if we go across these and they kind of gloss over you, it might well be worth reaching out to someone like Bronwen for some training so that you can understand some of the more complex strategies that are at work here. So it can be used where a project is controlled with a purchase lease option whilst planning gain is sought. So you secure a site, you get planning on it and you increase its value, but you don't pay any more to buy the site. So the uplift in value can then be used against your deposit contribution. So you're not now having to put a 25 or a 30% deposit down. And as long as the GDV has got a reasonable uplift, that's the end value, 100% of the works can also be funded at the same time as you go along the build. That's great, thanks, Simon. So here's an example of just one that can be done. This is one that I've got going through, or had going through. It's a double, it's the whole building here, the two roofs going back. It's a 16-bed HMO that's not been run particularly well. You can see it's not been maintained particularly well. And you might find that there are some tenant challenges and problems within here in this building. Again, on the panel tonight, Teresa would be the person to reach out to kind of help you manage and get the building ready for refurbishment, et cetera, and get your tenants moving on. Okay, if we go through the numbers, next one for me, Simon. Okay, so this one has got a purchase price of 250,000. However, on day one, it will value at 350,000 on purchase, okay, because it's had some planning uplift. So the lender will fund 85% of the purchase price here and all of the £90,000 refurbishment costs. So effectively, the client's only having to put in, or getting a loan on purchase of 212,500, £37,500 goes in, and out comes at the back end a project that's finished. I'd work with a valuer here to understand that the value will value at 500,000 on the back end, which meant the lender would lend £375,000 as an exit, meaning the client's got no money left in this deal. Okay, in terms of refurbs, naturally the right person to reach out to would be Paul on the call tonight. He can then talk you through how to find and fund all of the en-suites, shower units, et cetera, to go in the building. Once it's finished, okay, this particular building's got an infinite return on investment. Okay, that's something you might get help clarification by reaching out maybe to Simon, because once you've got this building up and running, you're going to need to get some independent tax advice to make sure that you don't spend too much tax on that 50k per year coming in. And that's me for tonight. That is how efficient recycling of cash works in the real world. And as I say, those points, if they don't mean, or if you've struggled with some of those points, do please reach out to the relative expert I've kind of made reference to. Yeah, in that little presentation. Right, that's all done. Thanks, Simon. That was seamless. That was very professional.
That's so perfect. Tim, over to your good self.
I'm going to be quicker for once. Makes a change for me. Right, first of all, a monthly update from Matter Starts. For those of you who haven't seen this before, every month for the last year or so, I've given an update on our conveyancing starts to give you an idea in real terms of what the market's looking like. Not necessarily an accurate view, but a pretty much real-time view. And so what's interesting, as you'll see, that there we are there in April, and it's down a little bit, but as you can see, it's still well above the average. So it's quite remarkable. So those of us who thought that things were going to crash in June and continue to crash are consistently wrong, apart from a dip, as you'll see, over Christmas. Really, ever since about September last year, it's been a really, really buoyant market, and there's absolutely no sign of it changing. Perhaps dipping off a little, tailing off a little. A lot of people are very keen to get in before June, before the latest stamp duty change, but I don't really think that's going to make much of a difference. Little dip down, but I don't think that's significant. So that's number one. Really things very much continuing as before. If I can have the next one, Simon. Right, what is this? Well, this is the hare and the tortoise, of course, and I am, or have been referred to as the property tortoise. And I thought I'd mention this just as a sort of a general theme, because so often when you hear property people, they always talk about going large and being quick and whatever, but actually it doesn't suit everyone. So for those of you who need to move quickly and need to get very rapid deals done, yes, it's fine, be the hare. You might need to be a rent-to-renter, or you might need to be a deal sourcer or a flipper, in which case you're going to need regular deals to make money if it's your full-time job. But there are many people for which actually it's much more of a long-term view, and that's me. So I am the property tortoise, and that doesn't necessarily mean we never get there. It might seem slow sometimes. My commercial conversion, jokingly, I used to say I was trying to get in the Guinness Book of Records for the slowest ever commercial conversion, and it was slow, but we got there in the end, and it's done well. So I was talking to a mate of mine in the pub last week, and it's lovely to go out to pubs to talk to people. He's a property investor, and he's previously been looking at large deals and done large deals and trying to get the hair view. And he very much took the view now, having done one of these big, fast deals, actually, he rather likes the idea of being a property tortoise and scaling back. And just to give you an idea of his deal, for example, and this shows how badly things can go wrong. You always hear about good deals, but you rarely hear about things that almost went wrong. It was a big deal. They had a gross domestic value eventually of 3.4 million. That's what they expected. But they had terrible problems. They had planning. Planning was a nightmare. They had a lot of money taken out on high loans and mezzanine loans. And eventually the costs came in at 3.5 million. Well, at that stage, when they were expecting to sell for 3.4 before COVID, all the warning signs were going, and he was really worried. In fact, he was saved by COVID because these particular properties, 14 properties, actually were attracted to those people moving outside London, and 13 of them have now been sold. But he came to the view, actually, it was far too risky. He put in 300 grand's worth of his own money, and eventually his profit for 3 years' work, and it was actually full-time work, was £120,000. Now, he risked the 300. He was working full-time in it. I think most of you would agree it's not a very good return for the colossal risk he took. So I think sometimes there is a point of being the property tortoise. And for those of you who aren't always rushing in as quickly as everybody else and feel, oh, they're doing such fabulous things, I'm not. Don't judge by their standards, judge by your standards. What do you need? If you need to go slowly, go slowly. On that point of view, me, the property tortoise, I've actually put my first paw, whatever tortoises have at the front, forward. And after buying nothing for 2 or 3 years, I've now got 2 offers in, and I expect at least one to be accepted. And the other one I will probably put up until it is accepted. So therefore, frankly, the tortoise is moving again. Doesn't have to be fast. And last thought with you, Warren Buffett, he's talking about retiring now. He's the 7th wealthiest man in the world. And the only reason he's number 7 is because he gave a big chunk of it away. And he made most of his money after he turned 50. So it's not necessarily a race. It's not a race to be fastest. It's a race to get to the finish line safely. And sometimes being the property tortoise can be a good policy. There you go.
Perfect. Thank you ever so much, everyone. I think that brings us. Oh, actually, sorry, Teresa. Sorry. Oh, howler. Teresa, you kind of stalled it at the beginning, but let's go through your points anyway. And I shall apologise yet again.
That's all right. Thanks, Tim, for those wise words. I mean, they were just loaded with some lovely thoughts to ponder on. Yes, so for myself, I just got a few points.
You've muted, Teresa.
Oh, yep.
It's just it just goes from bad to worse, doesn't it, this evening? I'm sorry, everybody. I think I'm doomed to just mess up. So this evening, I'm just going to give you a few items on the NRLA, just some bits that might be of interest. We've got some guidance for landlords now online. Basically, it's about home adaptations to support the older renter and those who have got disabilities. So we recognise that this is, it's a growing trend. So we've put some help now for our members with regard to that. So you can gen up all about what adaptations are, and how to fund them, how to manage your tenancies whilst adaptations are going on, things like that. So it's really, really useful. We've also got another service called NRLA Licensing 365. So that comes as part of the membership. And for those councils out there who are basically launching schemes across the country, it's becoming more frequent now that, especially if you've got a HMO. So for those in the audience who aren't aware of, what the criteria is of a HMO, just please put that in the chat. But yes, if you've got a HMO, or you're in an area of additional licensing or selective licensing, it might be useful to use our service whereby you enter all of your properties onto this service, and as soon as a licensing scheme, even if they're consulting on a scheme, they're about to start a scheme, then you'll be notified. So it just helps, because you know, councils aren't obliged to, as interesting as this might seem, councils aren't obliged to tell you that you personally that there's a scheme. So they will advertise, you know, in social media, but they won't contact the people direct. So it's up to the landlord really to keep abreast of what schemes are up and running. I just wanted to let you know about some webinars that are coming up. So we've got one on landlord lens. So that's just a general talk about what is happening currently in the private rental sector. So that's the 3rd of June. And we've got one on the 9th of June about zero deposits. So it's just another concept. So instead of, you know, tenants paying a month's rent up front, you know, there's this other service that they can take out, which just basically means they pay 1 week's rent for the whole year deposit. So, so if you want to know more about that, then click into that webinar. And I just wanted to let people know that, you know, you can get a discounted membership with a discount code that I've got here this evening. You can get £10 off the £75 membership, which is up to 2 people, and £15 off the up to 5 people membership. And that is it for me this evening. Go back to you, Simon.
Perfect. Bronwen, shall we do your slide at the end? Yeah.
Do mine
Okay.
at the end. I just want to say well done to everybody doing their update, and that I have special webinars with each of you individually on their specialist subject. So we can always, I can always share those with people if they're interested. So if you want to know a bit more about LNPG, the NRLA, and any other 4-letter acronyms, let me know. Okay.
So I just want to say as well, thank you ever so much for Teresa. Look, listen, we all have technological issues, but when you've got the smoothest skin like yours, then all is okay with me. Simon Hodgson is quite envious because his skin is more like the gravel trap on your driveway. So moving on from the that particular subject of skincare, we do need to crack on now and start to look at the questions. Now, this is YouTube Live, so if you do have any questions, make sure you type those in. I can see people already listing their questions, so I will be more than happy to ignore them. Sorry, technical glitch. I will be happy to refer them on to who it will be. So the first question we've got is when selling, and by the way, if I'm looking down, it's not because I'm dozing off like Paul Hilliard because of his age. It's simply because I'm looking at my camera. So there's nothing else to it than that. But the first question we've got on the group is when selling a property that has made a substantial gain, can stamp duty that was paid when purchasing the property be offset to purchase the cost? And the answer will be yes, the stamp duty land tax when you buy a property is indeed a cost. You cannot offset stamp duty land tax against your rental income, but what many people fail to remember is to offset it against their capital gains tax. So we have found that a lot of people do overpay capital gains tax and indeed stamp duty land tax because they are not looking at their numbers correctly. So great question to begin with. But we're going to try and move away from just tax today and go for other questions. So Archie's asked, in the future, I'd love to become a park ranger. Now I'm interested because I'm sure that's an old question for Bronwen, so I'm going to have to move on from that. In fact, shall we just do it anyway? Because it's an interesting question, so maybe I've just gone on to that one.
He just posted it really early. I don't think we covered that particularly last time because Archie's the 18-year-old lad, you know, he's the youngster who's learning.
I think it's worth doing it then. So
yeah.
Archie is asked in the future. So Archie, if you was here last month and we skipped over it, I do apologise, but you're now in the limelight. So here we go. So Archie's asked, in the future, I'd love to become park ranger. As it is essentially my dream job. However, the salary is not high. How would I be able to invest money into property and build a portfolio on a low salary? That's a great question. Let's get some imagination flowing into some of these answers. So we'll try and go with Paul Hilliard, but when that fails, we'll move over to Bronwen. So Paul, let's start with you first.
Excellent question, and good to hear that someone so young is prepared to venture into the business. It all depends on where you're starting from. If you're starting with absolutely zero funds, then I would suggest that you start off with rent to rent, as that's a fairly low capital, low cost, low risk way of getting into property. Other strategies you could consider would be cash raising ones such as assisted sales, or even purchase lease options. So, and as Teresa said earlier, oh no, sorry, Simon said earlier, difficult to tell you both. The skin complexion is so perfect. As Simon said earlier, if you don't know what those actually mean, then I suggest you have a chat to Bronwen to discover those. But yeah, excellent. Yeah, start off, get your toe in the water and start doing some rent to rent. So go and talk to landlords and see if you can rent their properties off them. But yeah, over to you, Bronwen.
Brilliant. And yeah, it sounds like a lot of acronyms for those that are joining who don't have knowledge about property. But the first is that knowledge, and I know, Archie, you're going to be learning, so that's great. The other thing that Paul hasn't mentioned that I thought, well, why don't I suggest is working with other people. So it could be, I think I've frozen, let me just, okay. So what it could be that you can work with family, wealthy friends, other people who've got money sitting in a bank. And you can even at your age, you know, getting mortgages is not easy. You could ask one of your parents or grandparents, or I don't know what, to be a guarantor perhaps, or certainly you can do all the work, they put the money in and you share the profits. You can also get really good at finding property perhaps below market value. You can then increase the value and you can refinance that property. But you're right, it's not easy on a low salary. But I reckon that you're going to get going pretty quickly. You know, by the time you get a few properties, you'll be able to step back and do your dream job. So it depends, order things in as well. So there's a few.
I think Bronwen's disconnected at a minute. Paul, shall we go to you first?
Okay, yeah.
Sorry, what do you mean, Simon?
Sorry, Bronwen, for whatever reason, on my side, it sounded like it disconnected, but it might be my side.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. It's probably everyone else.
I think we've come up with a few solutions there for Archie. So yeah, let's move on. It
was so impressive that Simon Hodgson was reduced to tears then. I just saw him wiping away a tear. So Paul Hilliard, would you like to take it on next?
For what, Simon? I've already answered that.
He's already answered that one. You know, okay. This is a great evening. You know, it's a comedy show, actually. I think you thought you were coming on to the serious Ask the Expert, but tonight we've had a few issues.
We have.
So apologies, but
I think broadband
we're all smiling.
Is all kind of failing us a little bit because my connection went really into the abyss. So let's move on anyway. Peter's asked, this is another question. So I have had my main residence for many years with 500k increase in value since I purchased it, which is great result. Is there a way I could buy another residence, rent the existing one and keep it with the view of passing it to my children without large tax costs? I would like to remortgage the existing one as it was owned outright with the wife. No mortgage on it. Peter, it's great to always refer to the lady in the house as the wife. Perfect way. My mind's the ball and chain. I don't know what other ones are out there. Now, when it comes to that, a couple of things I would say about this particular subject is if you're buying a property and then buying another property, if you're going to do that, you will pay the 3% SDLT high rate. And that's because you're not selling your main home as a part of the transaction. So do bear that in mind in regards to you buying a property for a second home, but not selling your first. You will pay the 3% SDLT rate. What I have advised clients on is the fact that you could move the existing property property, that's your own home, into a limited company. And you really got to work out, well, how much stamp duty land tax will you pay by moving the property into a limited company versus buying another home and paying the 3% there. So do get some specialist advice, because you could inadvertently overpay stamp duty land tax, and that would be a crying shame. So I help a lot of clients. But in terms of what you said, I don't think there's any issues with that. You mentioned about large tax costs in regards to moving it to your children. To be honest, we could be here hours talking about this particular subject, about IHT. To be honest, I can't really go into too much detail about that. You do need to get some tax advice on that one. So that said, we'll go to another question. Hopefully it's not about tax, because I'm going to have dry mouth syndrome later on. So Trevor has asked, not many questions. I think that was from Bronwen earlier. So if you'd like to make up some, and there you go. So if anyone's got any questions, feel free to type that in, okay? So Trevor asked, I want to serve a Section 21. Here you go, Teresa. This is all for you. Come on, smooth child. I want to serve a Section 21 notice to quit one of my tenants, or cut out one of my tenants, when the COVID eviction protection ends at the end of May. I know I could do it myself. You could make a mess of it. I did the same. I know I could do it myself, but I'm thinking of using a solicitor, as I haven't done it before. And this guy is terrorizing the house, but nobody will speak up. What do you do? And do you know a solicitor? Not sure, Tim. But Teresa, let's start with you. What's the mood in regards to being able to evict tenants because of COVID and the protections around that? And what's your thoughts around Section 21, and what support can NRLA give? Right. Yes. So Trevor's mentioned about the COVID restrictions, and that is a bit of a misunderstanding here, because those restrictions only refer to the bailiffs, basically. So those restrictions are apparently lifted end of May, will lift end of May, but basically that is just to stop the bailiffs going into to take final possession. So any notices that you want to issue to tenants, you've been able to do that all along. I've already issued a notice to my tenant. It's a bit of a lengthy notice period now. Section 21 is on a six month notice period. So I know that Trevor did actually give some more information about the situation, insofar as the tenant is also out of the fixed term, so it's been in the property for over a year. I'm assuming it was either a 6 or a 12-month fixed term, and this person owes over 3 months rent as well, and apparently is creating antisocial behaviour in this HMO, and apparently the tenants won't press charges. So Trevor's got a real handful here, but as I said earlier, this is like a replica of what I'm experiencing at the moment. So the question about should he do it himself? Well, you can issue a Section 21 yourself. I would recommend that you do get help with it. So you could go down the route of using the NRLA advice line. So you can use our template, and we've got lots of resources, and you can check with the advice line on, making sure that you do it properly, and making sure that, the notice fits all the required parameters, insofar as, have you served the tenant the correct documents at the start of the tenancy, for example. So you could use a Section 21, so that's 6 months, but then, I would steer towards a Section 8, and I'll give the reason for that. You could go in on a Section 8 for serious rent arrears, seeing as a tenant is already over 3 months in rent arrears. You could go for Section 8 6-month rent arrears. So that means waiting a bit longer. So basically, if you go in on that, then it will be a 4-week notice. And another benefit of using a Section 8 notice is that throughout this pandemic, people who have issued a Section 8 notice have still been able to gain possession of their properties, even with the bailiff. So, the bailiffs were stopped
from enacting out possessions, except if it was a Section 8 in certain circumstances, and serious rent arrears was one of that. So should the government, carry on with their shenanigans, then, Section 8 could be, a better option to go, ensuring that you can follow through with the process. As far as, which route should you use? So as I mentioned, use either NRLA. We've got a service called Landlord Action that you could use. There's help planned to who could help you get back the rent arrears, or you can use a solicitor. So there's a few choices there. But as Simon alluded, if you make the slightest mistake on gaining back possession, if the slightest box is incorrectly filled, then it basically just gets thrown out and you've got to start back to square one. So definitely don't do it by yourself if you're a novice. And as far as the antisocial behaviour issue goes, so the tenants, they won't press charges. So therefore you likely haven't got any police crime references. What I would suggest is that you find out who the local authorities antisocial behaviour team are. So for my tenant, I've contacted the council's safer housing team, and they are basically going to interview the tenants who are willing to be interviewed about the antisocial behaviour, and this will all stand you in good stead, especially if the prospective tenant is going to be seeking accommodation from the local authority. So yeah, I would recommend that you go down that route, because it also looks good, showing the tenants that you are making an effort to try and resolve this really awful situation that you're in. I really do feel for you, and hopefully that has answered the question. But yeah, please feel free to ask any more.
Perfect. Thank you ever so much. For everyone else watching, I just wanted you to appreciate how smooth Teresa's skin was. That's why I did a spotlight for everyone.
Did you?
I did, because I think it's just so brilliant. So thank you ever so much for that, Teresa.
Before you start doing more adverts for skincare products, which I'm sure you're now looking for, if you can't get the BBC gig, clearly you're looking for ITV. Before that finishes, can I just double check something with Teresa? I spoke to my property litigator this morning about a not dissimilar issue, and certainly the NRA will be much cheaper if you can go down that route. Definitely recommend that. Solicitors will be expensive for this, but my understanding is that there's a good chance that the current 6-month notice period for Section 21 may well change. Nothing definite, but that's the kind of rumour. People I've spoken to seem to think that it may well be reduced significantly once we get past June. Teresa, any thoughts on that? Have you heard that?
Well, we have to take into account that there's currently the Renters Reform Bill that is working its way through, and that is basically proposing to remove the Section 21 altogether. And looking at the way the government has acted during the pandemic, they've given priority to Section 8, the Section 8 notices, and they've just battered the Section 21s out of the way. It's just like, no, you can't, if the tenant doesn't move out, you can't get your possession back until we say so. So I would say that the Section 21 is likely going to be just wiped off completely, and we will be just able to use the Section 8, which is on grounds only.
Bronwen, I think you've got your hand up, which is, by the way, for the rest of the team members, Wayne was the first person to introduce the hands up approach, so very professional.
And what happened to him?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not even so bless him. So over to you, Bronwen.
Right. Yes, boys. Just let's get a word in edgeways. No, I just wanted to reinforce that we have used the Landlord Action Group through the NRLA for any of our evictions over the last 5-6 years, and it's been so good. So I just want to endorse that. Not only is it relatively cheap, but you don't have to worry, because they advise you, they tell you what they're doing every step of the way, and it's been without any issues. And I would just say, Trevor, if you're not sure about dotting those I's and crossing those T's, it's not worth it being thrown out. It certainly happens. I've heard a lot of stories where people do it themselves just to save a bit of money, but in the long run, you're going to have problems for a lot longer. So.
Thank you so much for that. So let's go to the next question. It's that was a great question set, to be fair. I learned a lot myself. Let's go to, there's a question by Chrissy. I will go to YouTube. So if you're watching YouTube livers or Facebook, I do have the technology. I don't know how to use it, but I've got the technology. If you do have any questions on a serious note, I will be able to pick those questions up. That's why I'm always looking to this side, just to see what your questions are. So if you've got any questions, feel free to type those in and I will be getting back to you in due course. Question from Chrissy, funny enough. And we've already done part of this because Archie, who was in the limelight, still in the limelight for me, 18 years of age, park ranger, brilliant how you want to do that. But Chrissy's got a slight variation question, also what she calls a newbie. However, one thing she said is, as a newbie, I'm partnering in business with my lovely neighbour. Would it be best in the first instance for rent-to-rent, buy-to-let or buy-to-let SA, which I think we've already covered off, where you should start in property. But what I wanted to cover off in this particular snippet is ignoring the LLPs, but partnerships. Tim, you and I have had many, many conversations about people getting together, mainly in business, but also in terms of life. But I think typically I'd say in business, people need to understand one another, pros, the strengths and weaknesses, the legal kind of things that they need to think about. What are the typical 1, 2, 3 things, Tim, that you would say to people that are looking to get into business for the first time? What kind of things should they be doing to protect one another's interests?
I think the most important thing is to have a really clear agreement, and that depends on how you're going into business. Some people don't quite realise, but as soon as they go into business, they've created a partnership. And as soon as you have a partnership, actually, there are rules setting out what you can and can't do. And that's set up by the 1890 Partnership Act. So some guys who died 120 years ago or so are setting out how you should run your business. And you may find that's not what you want to do. And equally, if you set up a company, unless you have a specific shareholders agreement drafted for your particular circumstances, you may find you're hidebound by somebody else's idea of how to run your business. So the most important thing, I think, is to make it clear exactly what your agreement is with someone else and get it in writing. And then make sure the third stage is to make sure that writing is actually properly protected in a legal document. It's all very well having an agreement with someone orally. That can make a contract, perfectly good contract, but it's hard to prove. If it's in just a couple of emails, it may not be clearer, but if you have it properly drafted by a solicitor, then actually you should make sure you've covered all the various angles. And doing that should massively reduce the risk of any sort of big bust up later on. And I'm afraid to say, I think so many people go into business with people they like, friends, even family. Everything's going to be fine, we understand. But actually, that's fine when the money's coming in. But as soon as the money stops, there's a problem. Sometimes even the money does come in, there's a problem. So I think it is a very boring thing. And I've said it time and time again. We're all entrepreneurs. We love the idea of doing the deal. The paperwork's the boring part, but absolutely you can't do without it. It's like insurance. You wouldn't dream of buying a house without buying insurance for that property. You should do exactly the same with any agreement. Any legal contract you enter into someone should be in writing, should be clearly drafted.
Oh, that was what I forgot to do. Insurance. I'm only kidding, guys. That would be very unprofessional if I forgot how to pay with their own insurance. My wife, funny enough, has life insurance on me, so I know that's up to date. Now, on YouTube Live, there is a question on there, which basically is from N Secret Loveth. What a great name that is. And the question is, if you make an overpayment on a buy-to-let in a limited company, will that make a tax deductible? I'm not quite sure what you mean by overpayment on a buy-to-let. If you're thinking about saying that the price should be 250, but you pay 260, then that will be a capital cost. So you will have that cost at some point. If you're referring to an overpayment of your buy-to-let mortgage, however, and paying down the debt, then really that's a tax. That's not really a tax deductible. That's just reducing your debt. So hopefully that's answered your question. But if not, please feel free to ask a question. Chris has asked a question. I thought that wondered when this would be coming up. So Chris Colby has asked if you have a trading company, an SPV or two, would you recommend putting them in a holding company? I knew this question would come up. And to be fair, limited companies is such a big subject. The big thing that we've been talking internally is whether people should be using a limited company. we are saying that it does depend on your circumstances, not just now, but also 5-6 years down the line. People that think they're high rate taxpayers right now may be pushed by their accountants, their Facebook friends, Twitter colleagues, whatever, to move into a limited company. And that kind of level of professional advice probably will shoot you in the foot, because you do pay the higher mortgage interest costs. What you've got to think about is, where am I going to be in 5-6 years' time? Because if you're going to be giving your job at some point, then why did you need a limited company if it was to save on income tax, which you'll end up paying more interest rates? And as we know, you've got to extract money out of the limited company. So please, 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 anyone listening in, this is a health warning. If I had the technology, it would be that kind of thing. That is the technology I'm using tonight. So I do apologize in advance. I'm not Walt Disney. But I would say, don't use a limited company at any cost without taking suitable tax advice, and indeed legal advice as well. So please don't do that. Let's just go to some people talk about taxes, but one question came up actually, and I want to bring this back to you, Simon Hodgson. Someone's saying here, how will giving up work and going full-time in property affect my ability to get buy-to-let mortgages? What I want to do with this question is, I want to go to you, Simon, of course, because we've not heard from you for at least 5 minutes. And once you start, we know you, a bit like minstrels, you don't stop. But what I'd like to do after that is, if we can, is then go to Bronwen. And I want your advice when people talk about the going into property, the quickly giving up their job, and things may not work out in accordance. You know, it's not always the best option in my view, but I'd like to get your intakes on that. So Simon, let's go with you first.
Right, okay. I'm going to have to make a couple of assumptions on this one, Simon. Does the person who sent the question in state whether they own property currently or not?
They don't say that at all, but let's assume that they may have one or two.
Okay, so two answers to the same question. Assuming you own property and you've owned property for more than the last 12 months, then chances are that you'll have reached out to someone like Simon, you'll have done a tax return and filed for the income. You now will have a provable income once you finish being employed as self-employed. Now, no, it's not as much as when you were employed. So there are some lenders I can't go to, but there are enough lenders out there who will work with low income earners that will be able to provide a mortgage, whether that's in your own name, limited company, or whether it's an HMO. So it's not the restriction you might think it is, as long as we've got an unbroken provable income somewhere along the line. If, however, it's completely the other way around, you don't own any properties and haven't done for the last 12 months, you've just set up as self-employed and then suddenly stop your employed income, you now have no provable income. And most lenders will want at least 6 months, but generally 12 months worth of continuous provable income if you're self-employed, or if you're employed, a minimum of 3 months or out of your probationary period. So we've just got to make sure that you don't fall foul of one of those two sets of scenarios. But there are always ways you can kind of make it work, if you like, as long as you plan ahead. Here we go, Sam. Not too long, was it?
No, that's perfect, to be fair. And it took me by surprise, in all honesty. I kind of just shocked myself. Bronwen, let's go over to yourself. I mean, let's talk about people giving up their jobs too early.
Yeah, well, you know, my advice is that you can learn whilst you're still working, and you can actually buy property and get those first 1 or 2 properties to give you that buffer. You know, you've got to prove that this is going to work for you and that you've got the right strategy and the right focus. And you need to be comfortable that you're not going to be under huge pressure because you've given up your job and haven't got an income. Not only is it better to get mortgages because you've got the comfort of the salary, but it's pressure on you as well. So what I did was to continue working full-time for that first 12 months. And then I reduced my hours down to 3 days a week because I need, and so what you can do, you can just ratchet that up depending on what sort of job you've got. But I do know people who feel that the pressure of giving up that job first gives them a kick to actually do, really work hard. But I think that's a stress you don't need in this game. So I would certainly suggest you do it gradually. And it's about time, isn't it? If you can create more time, and I stopped doing loads of things, watching television. I used to get up at 5 in the morning, and I used to, stop doing other things that wasted my time. And it's amazing how much time you can find if you really want this badly enough. So yeah, that's my advice.
Good, thank you ever so much, Bronwen. I echo those points. Now, in this particular, when you're doing a networking event and you're doing any form of presentation, the one way to get engagement is to ask people to raise their hands. And this is really difficult, because one thing I was just going to say to people is, who in here likes to have a great deal? And raise your hands. This doesn't work, does it, in virtual reality? If we can get everyone to do that, that'd be fantastic, but no one can see me. So it would just be a ridiculous thing to do. I mean, everyone in here is doing it. So that's helps me out a little bit. So thank you so much for that. But the reason why I mention about who would like a good deal is because Paul Hilliard, there is a LNPG discount code, isn't there, in which people can get a 10% discount code.
Next question. Yes. The short answer to that is yes. If they want to email myself or yourself, then yeah, happy to do that. You've got, although we're checking it out, OP10 should work. So,
OP10 is the optimized 10 discount, isn't it? So OP10 does give you the 10% discount. So everyone listening in, LNPG is fantastic. It does help me reduce my refurb costs. And actually, one of the videos I did with Louise, which was launched last week, it's had 6,000 views. So if you've not seen my video on refurbishment costs, then please do go check that out. I gave a massive testimonial to LNPG in that video, simply because we have used it for the last 5 years and we've been delighted. And as you can tell, the sun really does shine on the righteous, and that's why Paul Hilliard is looking quite blinded. Paul, a question over to you, though, is there seems to be a shortages of building materials. Is this affecting the LNPG suppliers, and should I delay the works that I have in progress?
Oh, excellent question. Let me just go back on the discount, just to emphasise it's a discount on the membership, not a further discount on what you purchase. So just to clarify that.
Thank you.
And to just give a promotion to one of our suppliers, if anyone's in the Which magazine membership, they will note that Magnet Kitchens have been voted the #1 customer choice for kitchens again for the 2nd year running. So if your builder says, "Oh, I don't like Magnet Kitchens," then my suggestion would be find another builder or kitchen fitter. So, Which magazines, they nominate Magnet Kitchens and they nominate Worcester Bosch as leading products. So there we go. Products availability. Yes, with COVID, there is, there's a mixture of COVID and a mixture of Suez Canal. I was reading the Panama Papers, so Freudian slip there. The Suez Canal, there is a huge amount of materials stuck en route to the UK at the moment from China. So that covers a lot of bathroom suppliers. But similarly, there's shortage of wood, shortages of plaster, because there's the UK factories are having to work social distance. So there are shortages. What I would suggest is that if you're an LNPG member, then contact the relevant business development manager who's contact, and they will guide you through the process. So yes, just bear that in mind though, that there are shortages or potential shortages. So just make sure your planning means that you leave some a delay or stretch within the planning process, so you're not building up too much pressure on yourself to say, "Oh, need the electrician in, but the plasterers haven't finished yet." So there are issues, but in the main we are fighting through. So thank you for the question.
I thought it was interesting the way you said that there's a shipment coming in. I felt like it was on Miami Vice. There's a shipment coming in. I think we should cover it. It's interesting how my mind works. So there's a question from Obidum who says, is it common for lenders to refuse lending when you're buying a property with bankruptcy notice on the land registry documents? I've never heard of this before. A bankruptcy notice on the land registry documents. Guys, I'm looking at you, Simon, and Tim, just to help me out.
Yeah, so largely that will depend on where the bankruptcy is in terms of the process. So whether it's voluntary, whether it's forced bankruptcy, and how the petition is effectively issued. So what can happen is the person is declared bankrupt. The receiver then puts charge across their assets so they can do nothing with them. Usually those charges are dispersed once you're discharged at the end. So it might be that the property is being dispersed midway through a bankruptcy and being sold by the bank via an auction. And potentially there are some bits of paperwork for the conveyancing solicitors to help with. Tim, you might better help me a bit more out here. I might have dug myself a bit of a hole.
I couldn't add anything more to your brilliant summary, Simon.
Thank you very much.
Wow, that's good, isn't it? Of Tim to come out with that. There, Simon, you've done a splendid job, I have to say. And if I had a little emoji, there you go. A nice little round of applause from me as well. So that's a good question. So the next question I have, Dinesh has asked, I've got a couple of questions and I'm going to pick up one or two of them about the use of a discretionary trust. Now, this is an interesting one because the use of a trust is quite complex to begin with. And I think when people talk about trusts, they typically say, well, is there a tax advantage? And I will often say, well, not really. It can actually be a tax disadvantage if you use it incorrectly. A trust really is more about protection. So think about that before you move into stuff. But they were saying, I'm planning to allocate gross shares into a discretionary trust from a newly formed SPV, which I've heard a lot about smart companies and people setting them with freezer shares and then having this gross share. I'm not going to go into too much detail about your setup because I think we could get ourselves in a lot of trouble if we go into too much detail. It could be a rabbit warren. But what I would say to you is, do you actually understand what a discretionary trust is? And indeed, how it works. Now, Tim, I don't know if you've got any, I know that I speak with Katie on your side of things, but do you have any views of people using discretionary trusts in property? And is it something that you would advise typically?
To be perfectly honest, I've got a specialist, as you know, Katie, who deals with this. I tried to speak to her again when I saw this question coming in, and she was unavailable. But I think the one thing with trust people don't really understand is the whole point of trust is control. In general, very general terms, this is really simplistic. If you retain control, that's not going to, if you want to retain control, that's not how a trust works. The whole point of a trust is you don't control the property. It's for the benefit of someone else and you can't control it and do whatever you want to. So I think people often understand, they somehow think it's a terribly clever tax thing, nearly put the word trust in there and suddenly you're saving all this tax. But the critical thing is you lose that element of control. Anything more than that, I'd have to go to my specialist on because it is quite a specialist area.
Okay, there was an update on the bankruptcy, so thank you, Obidum, for that. The point is the couple, so the vendors, have gone through the divorce and want to settle part way. Bankruptcy only relates to the man and not the lady. So does that affect what you said, Simon?
Let me check that I've understood that correctly. So they're selling a house, or they're trying to buy a house.
Well, I think this particular person may be trying to buy a house from this couple because he mentions that the couple are the vendors.
Right. Okay.
Oh, I love this camera moment. I'm going to take a screenshot just of this face of yours where it goes. Shall I come back to you?
You might need to, because that is an extremely technical situation.
I might even try and spotlight you just so we can show the panic lines forming on your face here. We'll go to another question. So let's have a look. This is on YouTube Live. I'm going between the kind of platforms because I'm quite professional that way. But the question I have here from Harminder core is, my former tenant owes me 4K. They declared bankrupt and left and cannot be relocated. What are my rights? Oh, good question. Let's go straight to you here, Teresa, and then straight to you, Tim. This person is being declared bankrupt. I don't think they may have rights, but really, are they going to get any money? Teresa, Tim, what are your thoughts on this particular case?
I mean, well, as far as rights, it's basically it's the right of the person to progress this person for the debt. As far as the person going missing, then there are tracing services out there. The NRLA service helpline, they will find the person and progress the debt with them. But as far as them being declared bankrupt and with it being 4K, I'm not sure if that would fall into a threshold of the debt being able to be recovered. I did do a quick search on that question. It was saying something about if they owe £5,000 and above, then if they're bankrupt, then you can progress them. But this seems to be slightly lower than that. And I suppose it depends on time frame as well that this has occurred in. Is it recent? If it's recent, then
could be.
Yeah. So yeah, I would just recommend, you can find them. It's very difficult to hide, isn't it, in this digital world that we're in?
Oh, you just look at Facebook, you'll find them.
Yeah.
So, because people will often say, I've been to this restaurant on various platforms. Simon, you had a quick interjection coming on there.
Yeah, so it's largely going to come down to when they file for bankruptcy, they go to the insolvency service, they have to present their case and they have to list all of the creditors that they are trying to put into the bankruptcy petition. So it depends whether they've put the debt that they owe the landlord into the bankruptcy petition as to whether it falls under the bankruptcy chain of events or not. So if they have forgotten to put it into the bankruptcy petition, then potentially, yes, you can still pursue the person for those monies if you can find them and also kind of make them pay out money. How would you find out that? I'm not sure whether you actually can, but you might be able to reach out to the insolvency service and see if there's a copy that is available to the public of that bankruptcy petition order to see if it's listed or not. Would be my first point of call. If it's in the bankruptcy, you've got next to no chance. You might as well forget it.
Tim, what's your thoughts?
The real problem here is lack of money. Let's face it. The idea that you're going to spend money tracking someone down. It's a relatively small debt. 4K is relatively small. But the problem with this is, how much money is there going to be at the end? You can't get blood out of the stone. There'll be other creditors as well. And the best you're going to get would be a share. So if it's, for example, you get back 19p in the pound, you're going to get back less than 800 quid. So almost certainly the costs of getting inquiry agents, etc., are going to be outweighed. It's very sad. It's not right, but that's life. It's the same with litigation in general. People, when they talk about litigation or talk about contracts, it's only worth pursuing something if they've got money. You can have all the rights in the world, you can have the best case in the world, a bit like chasing tenants. You can have fantastic claims against them, but if they haven't got the money, where's it going to come from? Sometimes you can get it from future earnings. Obviously, bankruptcy is different, but litigation, it's only worth chasing litigation if the other party has money. And sadly, often litigation is dropped simply because the other party's got no cash.
Yeah, that's very true. Let's go on and change the subject for a second. The question that I've got coming through is, do we all think that HMOs are a good idea, good strategy? What are the pros and cons? I'm going to go straight over to Bronwen and to Paul Hilliard about this subject. And Teresa, if you've got any thoughts about HMOs, then maybe come in at the tail end. So Bronwen, over to you first.
Thank you. It's a question that I get asked very regularly, and in fact was asked just this last weekend. So do HMOs still work? I think there's a lot of social media comments. Oh, there's too many. This licensing has come in. Councils don't want HMOs anymore. Can you still see me? And so people are thinking, oh my goodness, maybe I shouldn't do HMOs. But my answer to that is, can you still hear me? Is definitely HMOs still work very, very well. But what you've got to understand is not only the rules and regulations, because they can be quite highly regulated now, especially in certain areas of the country, but also thinking about the demand. If you think about young people, perhaps they've been through university and they've shared houses in that situation, they don't necessarily want to, and they can't afford to live in a flat on their own because of all the additional costs and the council tax, etc. They're more than happy to share a house, but step up to a much higher, much more luxurious house than they've been used to as students. So there is huge demand out there. You've just got to stand out from the crowd. There's a lot of average, pretty poor HMOs, perhaps ex-student HMOs that are really not nice. And so the reputation in the area is not great. All you need to do is just go to that next level and look at providing en suites, Sky Television or the latest, really good Wi-Fi. That's all you need to provide, isn't it, for young people? Great Wi-Fi, nice communal space. And, people will pay over the odds for the best space because they're generally working. So that's been my strategy with HMOs as young professionals. They want somewhere really lovely to live and they're prepared to pay really good money for it. So I think it works well because you've got multiple people paying as well. So from a risk point of view as a landlord, if somebody doesn't pay in a house of 6 people, then you've still got the other people paying. It's not like a single let and somebody leaves and you've got that void. At least this way you're going to get really good cash flow. You follow the 5 golden rules. So it's got to be in the right location. It's got to be the right type of property. So if you want to know what the 5 golden rules are, just send me a message and I'll send them to you. Oh, they're in the book. They're in my book. Thank you. Yes, they're in my book. Building your dream life. Anyway, I'll do that at the end. So that's HMOs. Yes, I love the strategy. It's been what I've done.
Oh, Bronwen, you put yourself on mute there. So, Paul, what's your thoughts on HMOs? Because I knew you've got plenty of HMOs yourself.
Yeah. I think it's still a brilliant strategy. It's very much more and more competition since rent-to-rent came about. Since people started talking about the rent-to-rent strategy, they're renting off landlords and converting them into HMOs. Hopefully they're doing it properly and they are adhering to all the regulations. But that's one of the offsets. I won't say a con, but an offset of a HMO. You've got to be cognizant of all the regulations that are there. So fire, health and safety, building regs, and obviously in an Article 4 area, planning permission. So yeah, there's more involvement, but the pluses are it's multiple streams of income. As Bronwen said, if you lose one tenant, if there's a void or they can't afford to pay, then yes, you're covered because, if you've done it right, then, the first 3 tenants pay for you, or the first 2 tenants pay for your mortgage, third tenant pays for your expenses, and the 4, 5, and 6 pay for your profits. So happy days. Big offset again is, are you going to self-manage or are you going to find an agent? Agents who are able to manage HMOs are very few and far between, and the vast majority of good ones are generally people who have their own HMOs and are self-managing and have set up their own letting agency to manage other people's HMOs. So the best idea on that would be to network or ask other landlords what their knowledge is of those agents. So yeah, but yes, ticks the box every time for me. HMOs certainly less riskier than service accommodation, even though service accommodation is another well-paying strategy. My gut feel is I love HMOs. So yeah, carry on.
The one thing I was going to, there's a related question, and it was from Harminder, who's on YouTube Live. And anyone who's watching this on YouTube, anyone that's watching this on Twitter, and anyone that's watching this on Facebook, make sure you do give this video a like. That really helps to let everyone else know it's useful. Also, do subscribe to our channels, subscribe to our pages, whatever it is that you're watching this on, and drop a question in as well. The one thing I would say on this, well, I'll come back to you, Teresa, in a second, actually. I just saw your hand going up. The one thing I would say about this platform, it is live. So please do get your questions in. Don't be shy. Get those questions in, and we'll always be able to try and get an answer to you. Now, Teresa, you had your hand up, so do you want to take it?
Yeah. I just wanted to add on about the HMO comments that were flying around. Some really good comments. I was going to say all the same myself. I just wanted to add about managing the property. The person really does have to be react and proactive. As soon as something happens in a HMO, you really do have to respond quickly, especially if it's anything to do with, sort of relationship issues. You want to get them nipped in the bud because they can quite easily escalate into, antisocial behaviour. I personally manage my property, and it is a bit of a handful, but it's rewarding as well at the same time. I would definitely recommend that, if you get a HMO, that you do, you make it compliant before you tenant it, because, there is quite a bit of work in making it compliant with, the fire safety and what have you. And I certainly wouldn't do it just, scanning across, Google looking for what you need to do to comply. I would recommend going on a course. NRLA do a really good course. It goes in depth. So there's a basic HMO course, which gives you just the foundational knowledge, and then there's a more advanced one which goes into detail, because there's a lot of detail, and the cash flow is great, but if you set it up from the outset, then it's going to be a lot less trouble.
Which leads me, so well done there, Teresa, because it leads on to the next interesting question. And if you like me, you do look for free tips on the Tinterweb, and you can go on LinkedIn, all those kind of stuff. And they're all good platforms. The thing is about free is that it can give you a lot of bother as well. So do get professional advice. And one of them says here, there's a lot of training companies teaching property. Some are really expensive. Can I learn everything that is, on YouTube and the internet? How do I check the value for money? I'm going to come on to you, Bronwen, because that's obviously naturally your fit. But one thing I would say to a lot of people watching, I'm just going to put in my penny's worth before Bronwen comes in on this one, because look, I've seen a lot of property investors and people that educate in property, and there's been a lot. I'm not going to name names here, but the people that talk about property that don't even have property. They talk about the millions, and they don't have millions. And you kind of have to do your own due diligence, to be honest. And you could do that looking at Companies House Beta, which is a platform. If you've got on Companies House, you can see which directorships they've got. And if they've got any properties in limited companies, when people talk about it, you can actually do your due diligence on there. And if they talk about personal property, ask them the question, what properties do you have? Can I go and see one or two of them before you kind of engage them in business? Now, when you're educating, that's a lot more difficult, but I would say that do your due diligence. There's a lot of people that make more money in property education than they do in property investing. And in my view, that kind of feels that it's not really genuine. So I do think you do need to do your due diligence on that. That's just my view, by the way. And hopefully I won't get too many dislikes because of that comment. But I do see people throwing lots of money into property investor courses delivered by people that don't actually have property. And I've got a few scars, a bit like Simon Hodgson. I've got a lot of scars of getting it wrong first time and then making that progression of getting it right. Our experience is probably a lot more valuable on this platform than some of the property education courses you can go to by people who don't invest at all. So that's just my penny's worth. But Bronwen, what's your thoughts on that particular aspect?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are a lot of companies out there, and I know when I was looking to learn seven years ago, I probably went to maybe 4 or 5 free one-day things, and most of them I walked out after the first couple of hours, because it was clear to me that they were just a marketing organization, and it was all rah and run to the back of the room, the first 5 people, you know. It was like, okay, I don't want to learn with these people. So it's a very personal thing. You've got to you know, give them a chance to say what it is they do, but then have a set of questions that you're going to ask everybody, and just to test them out. It is all due diligence, isn't it? I've come to do my program, and I've given my program free to a few people just this last week, because somebody that they were learning with is no longer operating, and they spent in the region of £10,000. Now, you know, it does happen, and they did their due diligence, and you just think, well, that's a shame, isn't it? You know, so I don't give my course away very often, but I had spoken to some of these people in the past. So yeah, I think be very careful before you part with your money. Make sure that there's a 30-day money back guarantee minimum, okay, so that then you know, so just check that out, because I know a lot of people are saying I need my money back, and they won't give it back. The other thing is, courses quite often say, oh, we include coaching and mentoring, and what they end up having is group conversations. So they might have up to 10 people on a Zoom link, and that isn't coaching. It is not coaching. It's not mentoring either. Mentoring should be definitely one-on-one, and certainly coaching. So I think, you know, you've got to think about your values, what feels right, have a 30-day money back guarantee, and you can use Google for this. I put the company name in, feedback. Okay, so company name followed by feedback, and it's amazing what comes up on the web to go, oh, actually, look at the feedback on Trustpilot or wherever it might be. And then if you're not sure, come to me and ask me. There are very few companies out there I don't know something about, and quite a few of them are really good lists to people. So that's my 2 pence.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I do think, just to echo the point of what Bronwen is making, is just be careful with how much money you're investing in. Maybe if you've got someone that you're not quite sure about, maybe instead of investing 20,000 in one go, maybe look to see if they do a course for £500-600 and find out about the person and see, because sometimes you could have a great teacher, but because of their method of teaching doesn't really apply to the way you learn, then that's not a good mix. It doesn't mean that that person's bad. It just means that your learning style may not be suitable. So you do need to always check out the person first and foremost, never mind how good the company is. That's a great question. Before I'm conscious, very conscious that it's approaching the end. Can you believe it? This is unbelievable how good this content has been today. The technical hitches is on the back burner. We have forgotten about them. We do not need to worry anymore. The question that's come up, and Fred, you're watching on YouTube. I know you're enthusiastic because you've posted the question twice. I'm going to answer your question. Don't worry. I am not Boris Johnson. Sorry, did I say that out loud? So the question is commercial property a good idea? I'm going to go over to Tim Bishop on this one, and indeed Simon Hodgson, because I think you might have some ideas about commercial properties. The one of the consensus here is, well, there's a lot of debts because of the commercial rent being unpaid. But I think there's a lot of opportunities if you get the right commercial properties. Tim, Simon, what are your thoughts?
I agree entirely. It's all about getting the right property. I think, you know, there is some shocking commercial property out there and some very good stuff. I saw one on the market recently and I couldn't believe the price. It was from the local authority. It was way overpriced because I was having a look. I wanted to have a look at it. And then I realized they were asking for a 50% overage. In other words, if you do develop it and make a profit, they want 50% of it. You know, it was just madness. And apparently there are some people interested at that price, and it was 50%, way over the top. But broadly, I think it can be. It depends what you want out of it. Going back to the beginning, it depends your circumstances. So particularly from me, for example, I quite like safety. I've tried a few things. So I'm now setting up a SAS, a small self-administered pension, which is very tax advantageous, and I'm putting commercial property in there. Now, the returns on commercial property may not be as great as perhaps serviced accommodation, but they may well be better than, say, a buy-to-let. In very general terms, a buy-to-let might make you 5% gross. These are horribly general terms. Commercial property, perhaps in 5 and 10. Bottom end, if you've got a really, really strong covenant, a really strong company, a Tesco or something in there that you're going to get your money from. If you've got Joe's Fish and Chip Shop, probably less so. So I think there can be some good money there. It's secure. Another advantage is that generally you don't have problems with people leaving rapidly, coming in and out, tenant problems. And the other beauty of it is they're usually fully repairing leases. So suddenly something goes wrong, the roof goes, it's not your fault, the problem is the tenants. So as part of a mix, yes, it really depends on what you want. It's probably a particularly good way if, like me, you want to do hands off, because I don't want to get involved. I don't have to manage it. So it simply ticks over, making a nice, safe, comfortable income. So yeah, I think it can work very well.
Simon, what's your thoughts before we come to a close and bring Bronwen back into this?
Great strategy. I think you need to knit it in with experience. So potentially, if this is going to be the first thing you're going to do, you would not start with commercial, because it's particularly difficult to get funding on a commercial property if you've never had any borrowing on a buy-to-let. So maybe kind of start with a buy-to-let, work your way up, maybe do an HMO or service accommodation, and then look at the asset classes. Tim's absolutely right in terms of yield. Your 5 is the minimum, 10 is maybe the norm, and you can add some incredible value with the strength of covenant. It's quite a difficult thing to do in today's current marketplace, but in a more normalized area, if you can get a cluster in your property, you can potentially double and sometimes triple the value of the asset in a relatively short period of time. However, it's a bit like trading Forex. You can also do it in reverse, and the losses are equally as eye-watering. I think NatWest went on not on record, but have suggested that some classes of commercial property they suspect will drop by 40% in value as we kind of come out and we really find where the high street is, where restaurateurs are, cafes, etc., etc. So without doubt, there's an opportunity out there, but it's also the opportunity to lose quite a lot of money at the same time.
Perfect. Well, listen, I'm going to bring Bronwen back into this section. So Bronwen, would you like to explain what we're seeing on our screens?
Look at that colourful page. I think I've been criticised in the past, believe it or not, by other people who are saying, you don't talk about what you do and what your course is all about. But I'm just going to summarise now quickly that these people in this expert panel are all people that I rely on every day, not every day, every month. Well, every day for Simon Hodgson at the moment, but I rely on their advice and their expertise. I don't want to be an expert in these subjects, but I want to know who do I speak to, who can help me. And that's very much why I've been successful in what I've done, because I always look for the best people and I'm more than happy to pay for that advice. So I'm just going to quickly touch on the fact that I do have a 30-day money-back guarantee, and my online program of 22 one-hour webinar videos is only £695. So if anyone's interested in learning or even wants just to understand what's included and wants to have a chat with me, then find me on social media, send me a message, send me an email, and I'm more than happy to have a chat. And then, of course, there's my book. And I do have a copy of my book in front of me. There we are. This is Building Your Dream Life. So if you want to look at case studies that I've done and how I've been successful by working with all of these people, what the top tips are, then that's a great book. It's also on Audible. So there's a bit of marketing at the end, because I'm really bad at doing that in these events. We have so much fun, don't we, everybody? And thank you again for hosting, Simon. It's great. I know a few technical hitches. So if you're coming back to ask more questions next time, just hang on in there. You know, the first few minutes, it may not work, but you know, be persistent. That's the thing if you want to learn. Thank you, everybody. It's been
Thank you.
great.
Before we go, let me just to finish off, actually, the next session is Monday, the 7th of June. So it is going to be going back to the first Monday of every month. So it's going to be the 7th of June at 7 p.m. So make sure that you can join us for that session. And I look forward to taking your questions as well. But from me and the rest of the team, have a fantastic day. Simon, Hodgson, for you, please stay online. But for everyone else,
Yes.
thank you ever so much and have a great evening.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.